All right. And again, I want to thank everybody for coming to the first of the 2022 What's Growing On sessions. And like I said, I'm Dorothy Jordan with AARP, and I am here with the brilliant Arent Lanier, who is the founder of and executive director of Victory Teaching Farm. And she is going to be talking about preparing for summer, so preparing your summer garden. So Arent, I am going to let you take it away, and I'm going to put myself on mute. So you just tell me when to switch slides.
Okay. Well, obviously we're on our intro slide here, what's growing on, prepping for summer. And so this is going to be all about what we need to start doing right now and on through the season to have successful spring, summer gardens. And so let's hit that first slide, Dorothy. Okay, so obviously the first thing we need to think about is what we need to get started. And so we've just got a list here of just some essential supplies that you're going to need. Obviously seeds, if you're starting things from seeds, which is one of the most economical ways to grow, you know, your fruits and your vegetables and even your flowers and things like that, is to grow directly from seed. But if that's not something that you feel like you're able to do or want to do, and you just rather go buy the transplants already, you know, ready to go in the ground, then that's great too. If you're using containers for your gardens or raised beds, you may need to get some more soil and re-implement some of those beds with some new fresh soil. Potting trays, again, if you're growing from seed, you're going to need some potting trays. Pots, if you want to grow in pots or anything like that, obviously you need to gather those. I mean, you really can use almost anything to grow in. My grandmother used to grow her peppers on her townhouse patio in 5-gallon buckets. So honestly, you can really use anything to grow in as long as you've got good soil. Gardening gloves are, you know, something if you don't like getting your fingernails dirty, or you're working with something that, you know, like okra or squash, things like that, a lot of times they can be kind of prickly. So gardening gloves are great. Pruning shears, you definitely want to have a good pair of pruning shears. Watering can or a hose, and just making sure you have access to a water source. And then your general hand tools, your spades, shovels, cultivators, things like that. So these are basically the basics that you'll need to get started. All right. So some of the things that you really need to know is that wherever you are going to grow, you need to make sure it's a sunny spot and that it gets preferably the morning sun. Typically, most fruits and vegetables and flowers, unless they're more of a shade plant, they need on average about 6 hours of sun per day, and the morning sun is what is ideal. You also want to know your planting zone, and basically that's just kind of telling you where you are in the United States and what things grow best in that area. So you wouldn't, want to grow something that is a colder climate type plant that they can grow up north in the summer, but would never survive down here in the south. Same with your average first and last frost dates. We're thinking we're past our last frost of the year, but I believe we have one more night coming up, and that could change between now and then, but it seems like Friday or Saturday, we're going to drop to 31. So those of us who have already started putting tomato plants in the ground and things like that, we probably are going to have to protect them one last time. But just kind of knowing those dates will give you an idea of when to start, getting things outdoors and into your gardens. And those websites, those are great websites. You can always search, and there's a ton of websites with multitudes of information on all of this. But these are just really two really good sources, Farmer's Almanac, and then of course USDA.gov. And you need to know what plants are going to thrive during the spring and summer, and you want to plant only what you're going to eat.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Yeah, no, you want to know what plants are going to thrive during the spring and the summer in our area. And typically, when you're planting vegetables, I mean, we think about things that we typically eat: peppers, tomatoes, okra, those things are squash, zucchini, they thrive in our southern climate. But plant only what you will eat. And I will tell you, it is so much fun. I always enjoyed getting, different types of rare type seeds or heirlooms and things like that. But you have to be careful with that. And even sometimes at your local garden centers, specifically the bigger box garden centers, they are kind of national. So they get a lot of the same things here that they do get up north. And so not everything necessarily grows that great in our climate. And it's fun to see something unique and, oh, I would like to try this, but if you don't think you're going to eat it, I wouldn't plant it. Save room in your gardens for stuff that you're going to eat, your favorite fruits and vegetables and things like that.
And I'll jump in here real quick, because I know we've talked about this before too, Taryn, is a lot of the seed packets have the growing zones in them, on them. So you can always check those seed packets in the big box stores to make sure that they're, in the right zone too.
Yes, they do have that. The back of the seed packet has everything you will need to know to start those seeds and go forward, with that particular plant. So, all right, we can go to the next one. So this is just a handy dandy little guide just for us in Alabama, some of the major cities, and when our last frost date is going to be. And obviously, those of you that are further north are going to have a later last frost date. And then Mobile and Montgomery, you can see that we are in March. And it's very interesting because, again, we are in that first week of March and we feel like, we're done with the frost, but yet next week we've got, a night that's going to probably be 31. So, and not that, not to deter you from going ahead and putting your plants in the ground, or if you've already done that, you can still protect them because it's not going to be, extreme to where, an extreme freeze or anything. So, but yeah, this is just a handy guide. So if you see your city on there, you might jot that date down real quick. All right. Okay, so this is what we need to be doing right now. If you've not already done this and you're waiting on that last frost date to get your plants in the ground, and is to prepare your garden sites and your containers. So you want to clear and clean out any dead and diseased plants and all weeds, including cleaning your gardening tools before use, because if there was a diseased plant or even pest, those could still be existing on your garden tools from last year. I do recommend, if you were using containers and you had diseased plants, that you may consider replacing the soil in those containers. You want to try to remove any pests that you can see. Now, granted, that's not going to keep pests from coming into your garden, but if you can visibly see, particular pests that you don't want in your garden, then you can go ahead and kind of alleviate that future problem by scooping them out of there and getting them a new home. You want to test your soil to determine the nutrient values. Typically, and they have the little tester kits, you can purchase them at any garden center and any big box store that has gardening supplies. And that's just to determine the levels, basically the levels of potassium and nitrogen and things like that in your soil. And the test kit actually will tell you what the ideal range is for what you are planting. And you can also search that on the internet as well. I mean, we can find anything we need on the internet, but you can, find out that, test your soil, and then determine what you need to add to get it to that right level that your plants will enjoy. And then mulch. Adding mulch to our gardens will help alleviate future weeds. So I encourage you to do this in the very beginning, even if you've got to move that mulch out of the way to plant your plant and then mulch right back around it. But if you go ahead and do this in the beginning, you're going to have a greater chance of not having weeds overrun your garden in the middle of the summer. Okay. So seed starting, if you're starting from seed, I will say that most everything that we grow here during the summer, our peppers and our okra and you know, those types of things, that squash, zucchini, you can go ahead and start those seedlings now. Tomatoes, you might be a little bit behind, especially not necessarily up north. You've probably got a few weeks that you can still go ahead and start your tomato seeds. But down here, if you don't already have tomato transplants that are got that second set of leaves, or even, you know, more than that, and ready to go in the ground, they may not produce before it gets too hot, because there is a when the nights are above, I think it's 75 to 80 degrees at night, then our tomatoes typically stop producing, with the exception of cherry tomatoes. Those typically, and Romas as well, they kind of will last a little bit longer, but any of your slicing tomatoes and things like that, usually by May, 1st of June, they stop producing because it's too hot. But the rest of those things, you can go ahead and start from seed now. Basically, when you start your seeds, you're typically, and you can follow on the back of the seed packet, but typically it's about 1/4 of an inch down into the soil, and then just brush a little soil on top and just keep them watered regularly to where they're moist. And you can stick your finger down in there. A lot of times they will look wet on the top, but when you put your finger down in there on the, you know, and I do it on the sides, so you're not pushing your seeds, you know, deep down in there, but you can tell if it's dry underneath that first little layer of soil, because you do not want to let your seeds dry out. If they've begun to sprout and you just don't see them emerge yet, and you let them dry out, you may not get a plant from them. And once that second set of leaves appear, and I know they seem so teeny tiny and fragile, and they are fragile, but they're a lot more resilient than you think you are. We have planted seedlings that are the size of those on the slide there, pulled them straight out and put them in the, you know, ground, and they flourished. You just have to be careful not to disturb their roots as much, because they still, you know, you almost want them to not even know that they've been moved from their seedling tray into the ground, which can be pretty tedious. But if you're more comfortable waiting until they're a little bit taller and look a little bit sturdier, that's fine. But you can put them in the ground once they have that second set of leaves on them.
And Tara, right, we do have a quick question before we switch to the slides. In the chat, do I still have time to work manure into my raised beds in order to avoid burning summer veggies or vegetables, or is this something that I should have done in the fall?
That's something you probably, I mean, if you're, say, I'm just gonna assume maybe chicken manure or horse manure. If especially chicken, it can burn them immediately. If it has not sat and composted, I would definitely recommend not working that in now, because it does need time to kind of break down so it doesn't burn your veggies. I'm not sure where you are as far as within the state or whatever, but if you're not going to be putting things in the ground for, you know, a couple of more months, and that manure has sat for a while, you probably would be safe. But if it's something you're just going to go out into a pen and scoop up and work into your soil and then plant your plants in the next week or two, I would strongly encourage no, because it probably will burn, especially if it's chicken.
And that was Miss Julie, and she says, great, thank you very much. So okay. Good to know. I learned something. All right, next slide, here we go.
So yeah, so we talked about this, never let your seedlings dry out. And I just want to reiterate that, because I actually went to a store this weekend, and all of their plants, unfortunately, looked like the ones with the big X on it. I mean, the plants looked great, but the thing about that is if you've got a transplant that's 3 or 4 inches tall, and the soil looks like that, and you think, oh, but the plant looks great, it's probably fine. It could already have root damage and just not affected your plant yet. So you always want your soil to look like the one on the other side, that really dark, rich looking soil. You don't want to drown them, but you can kind of tell the difference between, you know, too dry and, you know, what looks like it's ideal. Okay, so this is a lot of times, and again, I will say that this happens to everyone, these kind of issues. It's hard to, you know, I mean, have the ideal environment. We all strive to do that, but, you know, sometimes it's out of our control, especially if you're, you know, direct seeding outside or anything like that. But a lot of times we get worried when our seeds haven't popped up in a few days. Well, a lot of times it's just the timeline. Some seeds emerge within, you know, 3 to 5 days. Some seeds can take 10 to 15 days, and then give or take outside of both of those ranges. So don't worry if your seeds aren't following their timeline that's on their packet. As long as you're making sure that your soil isn't drying out, that your seeds are in a nice, cozy, warm spot, that, you know, you're giving them plenty of sunlight, then you should be okay. Now, if, you know, you're 2 weeks past the time frame, then you might consider restarting, because it could be that either your seeds were older and just lost a lot of their germination, and they're just not going to come up. So, you know, if you go a week or two past that time frame, then I'd start kind of thinking about starting them again. So this is what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, about that second set of leaves. They're true leaves, and when they are transplant ready. So as you can see, your plant, your seedling, and this is what we were talking about not letting the soil dry out, because there's a whole process that's happening with that seed growth as it is preparing itself to emerge from the soil. So you can kind of see that in the graphics. And your seedling's going to come up with that first little set of leaves, but those are not their true leaves. You want to wait, like I said, just like in the picture. Once it has that second set of leaves, then they are ready to go in the ground. And again, that looks like a little bitty tiny baby plant that's probably not ready to be moved, but they are. You just have to be careful with them. So, but they definitely are transplant ready when they've got that second set of leaves on them. All right, so now we're ready to transplant. So you want to be sure your soil is ready by loosening it. So because you don't want to put a plant into the ground and the soil be too compacted that their roots can't do their thing and spread out and get comfy. So you want to go ahead and loosen your soil where you're going to plant your plant, and go ahead and do it down pretty deep, because the roots are going to kind of continue to push down through there. So you want them to not have any resistance. I always say to thoroughly water the site to ensure that you've got equal water distribution once you transplant, because once you put that plant back in the ground and cover it, you're going to have water runoff. So you want to make sure the hole that you're putting that plant in is well watered as well. And you want to have it deep enough and wide enough that it fits right down in there. And I usually submerge my plants in the soil right below that that first little bottom set of leaves, just to give it a good sturdy start. Again, do your best not to disturb the root ball. Oh, and remove any dead leaves, because even though they may be look like they're dead, they're still sucking nutrients and pulling away from all the healthy of the plant. But again, do your best not to disturb the root ball. Again, most plants are pretty resilient with that, but ideally you want them to feel like they've never changed. You know, nothing's happened, that they're still just happy and healthy in their little spot. You want them to feel like they didn't even get moved. Again, feel that soil around, and you can kind of lightly push down on the ground just to kind of give it a good little sturdy, just kind of push it down in and get it sturdy and tight. Water very well at the base of the plant. You want to try, even throughout the the growing cycle to water at the base of the plant, because you really are trying to get that water source to the roots. And also getting watering the plant on the leaves and things like that can encourage disease and things like that. So you want to always water at the base of the plant. And then keep, again, just like our seedlings, you want to not let them dry out until they're very well established. And then at that point, you can probably, kind of gauge. You could probably water every other day, or if we've had a lot of rain, you could just skip a whole week. And it's just, I always encourage people to go out into their gardens daily, even if it's just for a few minutes. And then you can kind of get an idea, okay, do I have pests? And you can eradicate that at the very beginning before it has a problem. You can pull up those random little weeds that start popping up before they become a problem, because they can become a problem, the same with pests, so quick. Like within a week, you could all of a sudden walk outside and all of your tomatoes are completely eaten. So you want to, just kind of take a look every day, and then I'll tell you also, do they need to get watered? And it's a good way to keep an eye on them, just to make sure you stop any problems before they start or get out of hand. Okay, so a lot of times this is a question I've had so many times. I've transplanted and the next day they died. Well, that's not necessarily the case. A lot of plants, especially if their roots were disturbed a little bit too much, or they just have changed their element completely and totally, they can go through transplant shock. So just continue to care for the plant like you normally would care for it. And typically within just a couple of days, they perk right up and are happy as can be and continue to flourish and grow. So this is something so easy, because we probably all, if we are gardeners, we probably all eat fruits and vegetables. And, if you drink coffee, if you, use a lot of eggs, or just, buy eggs on the regular, these are things that you can throw in a bucket. You can even throw eggshells and coffee grounds and things like that directly in your garden, but you want to compost, because what you're doing is you're creating almost your own natural type fertilizer for your plants from all of your spent veggie and fruit scraps, including eggshells and coffee grounds. No dairy, no meat. There are ways to compost with things like that, but it's not worth the effort. And if it's not done correctly or in the right process with all the right elements, then you could have a smelly problem on your hand. You could also have a rodent problem on your hand. But, just spent fruits and vegetables, leaves, grass clippings, all of these things can create a great nutrient-rich source of fertilizing your garden throughout the year. You can even make what's called a compost tea. And you'll see down there in the bottom, basically they just have put all their scraps in a bucket, and then you just fill it with water and let it sit for a few weeks out in the sun. And then when you're ready, you can drain it off and pour that liquid directly on your plants. And it's like a nutrient-rich tea for your plants, a compost tea. But I strongly encourage composting. And sometimes you may feel like you want to use a commercial fertilizer, and that's always, that's personal choice. There are a lot of organic types out there to do that with. I would encourage using those first before moving on to something else. But composting is economical, it's easy, and it works. And I can't stress this one enough again. We talked about this in the very beginning. You want to continually keep your plants mulched. It keeps them all nice, warm, and cozy. It helps eliminate with weeds, and it also helps deter certain pests. So compost and mulch are two very important practices to implement into your gardens throughout the year. Even in your raised containers or your raised beds, you still want to do the same. And so hopefully some of these tips are things that are going to help you. And I know just for a fact, following these things, because this is what we do in our own gardens and have done at the farm, they will soon have you enjoying the fruits of your labor. Again, don't be discouraged if you're not having success. My husband and I are going through this right now with our home garden. We started all of our tomato plants from seeds probably a month and a half ago, and the whole first round of them all died. And we don't know why. It just happened. And then we had some that flourished, and we're moving those to the garden, in the next week. And so, we've gardened all of our lives and grown up around it. And, we feel like we have a good base of knowledge, but even still, sometimes you just can't control the elements. You can't control even, the type of seed. We saved seeds. So it may have been the seeds didn't get stored as properly as they should have. I mean, or maybe it got too cold where they were. There's so many different reasons that your seedlings or even your plants in your garden could not be flourishing. But don't let that discourage you. Just keep starting over. That's all I can say. Until you have that success, try again.
Awesome, Arent. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions right now? If you do, please feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask away. Let's see. Julie says, thank you for the inspiration, Ms. Arent. Heading out to the backyard right now. Wonderful. That's really exciting.
It's raining here. We can't get outside today, but that's wonderful.
Yeah, get out while you can. Exactly. And folks, I'm going to put my email address as well as Arent's in the chat for you right now. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free to send us an email. And if you have ideas for workshops, what we can talk about in some of these workshops, please give us ideas. We're always looking for good ideas, good questions to answer. We'd love to hear it. So let's see. Miss Deborah says, thank you so much. I'm new to gardening, but getting ready to get started. That's exciting, Miss Deborah. You'll have to keep up with us, keep in touch with us, and let us know how it's going. But
yeah, and also, Miss Deborah, feel free. My email address is there on the bottom of the screen. Feel free to email me with your questions. I'd be happy to answer them or point you in a direction that could help you with anything that you may have concerns or questions about.
That's great. That really is. And let's see here.
A Zoom on composting.
Oh, okay. A Zoom on composting. We can work on that. So
we can do a whole episode on composting. I know, and I think you're going to mention our upcoming episodes, but we can add that one to the list, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's see. Yes, composting ditto. Okay, sounds great. And so in May, we've got April, May, and June set up, I think, to go. And they're going to be pretty exciting, but we will definitely do probably composting maybe in July. How does that sound to you, Arent?
I think that would be great, because then about that time, even though it's still hot, we are getting into that mode to where we're starting to need to get ready for our fall gardens. So that would be ideal, considering Julie had that question about the manure and should she go ahead and put it in now? Well, we can definitely hit that in July and talk about that. And then we, that's when we'll be able to do it, getting ready for fall gardens, and we wouldn't have to worry about that, hurting our plants.
Excellent. I'm writing this down now so I won't forget. July episode. Yeah, so that's a great idea. And let's see what we've got coming up next. They're really interesting. I'm really excited about these. They're a little different, but bear with us. We're going to be talking with some beekeepers about bee ecology and conservation and beekeeping. And what a lot of folks, you know, we really depend on bees to pollinate our plants and to, you know, so that we can get those fruits and vegetables and things that we need. And so we are going to be learning about bee ecology and conservation, and maybe some of the plants that you can plant along with your garden that attract bees. So they can kind of help pollinate the garden for you and all of that good stuff. And then we're going to be talking with the Mobile Medical Museum about the history of medicinal plants, which I think is pretty interesting. And the museum actually has a garden of medicinal plants that we're going to try to get out there and do some video and kind of do a quick tour of that. So we just wanted to toss it up a little bit, but while we're in there, in those, you can always ask your gardening questions. That's what we're here for. And again, please email me and or Arent, probably more Arent for the gardening questions. Go ahead.
So, hey, Jerry, I saw Jerry post something about it would be good to know what they should be doing month by month. I don't know if this is something possible, Dorothy, but I would be happy to pull a one more slide together with that information.
Sure.
I don't know if we can add it to the end of this one. So when it's replayed, I don't know how that would work. But I mean, that's even if, I know a lot of times you will post something like that in the comments.
Yep. I can post. What we're going to do, folks, is because y'all registered for this, whatever email you registered through, I am going to send you the link to this recording when I get it up onto YouTube, which will take me a couple of days. And what I can also do is send you in that email the slide that Terrence talking about.
Okay.
And so we can do that. And then we are also going to replay this episode on our Facebook page and our YouTube page later this month. And so you can, and I will also post it in those comments when I replay it later this month. But yes, we can absolutely get that for you. And again, always, always, always feel free to email either of us any questions or ideas you have. But that's a great one.
Yep. And I'll get on it.
Awesome. Thank you, Arent. And folks, thanks so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And again, if you registered, I have your email address, so I will send out the recording when I get it uploaded, and with that, along with that slide that Arent will get to me, and so you'll have this available to watch whenever you'd like. So, all right, folks. Well, that is that, and I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much. Like I said, we'll be here the first Monday of April talking about bee ecology and conservation and kind of how they work with your garden to make it better and healthier. And until then, we'll see you next time. Y'all have a great one. Stay healthy, stay safe. And if you're anywhere down here in Mobile, stay dry.
Happy gardening.